Episode 23 with Wang Brandt.
Hey everybody, you're listening to the Never Forsaken podcast, looking at the lives of the outcasts, the seekers, the never forsakens, those in or out of the local church and passionate about Christ. The show is broadcast weekly, and show notes and more information can be found at neverforsakenpodcast.com. I'm your host, John Robinson. Let's get into the show. Thank you, podcast listeners, for tuning in to another episode of the Never Forsaken podcast. Tonight's guest, all the way from Taiwan, I'm speaking with Wang Brandt. Cindy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John.
Cindy, great to have you, and we're just going to talk about Christianity a little bit. Met you through Facebook, as many of my podcast guests, and being that we have somewhat similar backgrounds is what we look for on the show. Most of the people that I talk with are either raised fundamental or somehow raised in the church, and either through different circumstances have left the church or just saw a different type of spirituality. And so you would say that's been your history as well?
Yeah, I really like the idea of your podcast, and I really like the idea of seeking out people who are sort of on the margins of church and orthodoxy. I would say I grew up conservative evangelical. I don't know if I would use the word fundamentalist, even though I think a lot of fundamentalist ideas seep into the conservative evangelical community. So yes, I grew up conservative evangelical, and I definitely identify as progressive Christian, even though I recognize that even that label is imperfect.
Yeah, I agree. There's so many labels, especially now that they float around, and but I like having the conversations about them, and not to put anybody into a certain little box and say, well, this one's progressive and this one's conservative, because you could even have aspects of your life that have elements of both. So what I read on your blog I thought was very interesting. You mentioned you were a very good Christian girl, and so your upbringing was in the church. And would you mind to talk about the beginning of your Christianity?
I guess it's kind of sumptuous of me to call myself a good Christian girl, but I do think that because my personality is very much type A, I kind of strive for excellence in whatever I do. It's just the way I'm geared. And so when I became a Christian, I was only 12 years old. I tried to do the best that I could, and everything that I was told I should do, I tried to do it to the best of my ability. And so, I remember we would have Bible studies and we would do memory verses. And I would try to be the best at memorizing scriptures, I tried to last longer than anyone else did and memorize more scripture verses. And I prayed, and I learned how to do all the Christian things really well. And then eventually I committed to doing missions, which, considering that my background is coming from a non-religious family, it was a huge thing for me to be that committed, that devoted to the mission. So yeah, I would say I was a good Christian girl.
So a lot of times people that get into missions, it's because their parents were missionaries. So that wasn't the case with you?
No.
Yeah, what made you decide to do missions?
I really think, looking back, that I was just trying to be the best Christian possible. And I think that because I even, even though my family was not a missionary family, the school that I went to was a missionary community. And I think that there was always this, maybe unspoken, but this idea that being missionary was like, the goal, and just the most faithful that you could be. And so I think I kind of strive to be that, just sacrifice everything for the cause and for God.
Right. It's almost like it's one of the highest callings, you could say.
Exactly.
So through all of this, what I got from your blog as well was that you seem to become somebody that other people could turn to, and they could trust you and come to you for spiritual guidance. But then you have this really cool line in one of your blogs that says that the dark night of your soul descended upon you. So what was that like?
The thing about blogging is that you have to pick and choose what to include, and I can't include all the details. And I was trying to fit into this narrative that I set out for my blog, where I went through this period of faith unraveling. And so I talked about the dark night of the soul descending upon me to correspond with my faith unraveling. But I think the reality is that doubt has always been a part of my faith from the very beginning. Like I said, I grew up in a non-religious family. So when I converted into Christianity, even though I was still young, my family was non-religious, but my school community was Christian. And so with that impact and influence of both cultures, I think, I always had moments of, well, who's right and who's wrong? And I think it's just very human to wrestle with doubt. And so I don't think that doubt is necessarily what was so dark about my faith, but I think I was being honest and truthful when I used that line in my blog, because when I did go through this period of deconstructing my faith, it was dark, but not so much because of the doubt that was in my heart, but because of the way the community responded towards my increasing convictions of what I think being a Christian really meant. So I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. I can totally relate to that because I think the doubt sometimes it almost comes across as sinful in some Christian communities, and you'll get labeled whatever. You could be being labeled a heretic or that you're unfaithful and that you're just negative. There's a lot of negativity that goes along with that. Did you experience that as well from the Christian community that you were in?
Yes, I definitely did, and I talk about that a little bit in my post. And I think that was what was so hard about the struggle, because I resented it. The more that I would just maybe even just casually mention that I have this idea, that I'm thinking about whether or not, hell actually exists, something like that. And then people would respond with fear or look at me like I'm dangerous or heretical. Then it made me resent it even more. I feel like, why is there no room to discuss these things? They're just honest questions that I have. And so I feel like it made the process more tumultuous than it needed to be. It could have just been, it's always hard to wrestle with questions, but if you have a safe space to wrestle with them, I think it doesn't need to be so traumatic. But because of the way people responded, it made it more traumatic for me. It also increased my doubt, because it made me think, well, if they're so concerned about me asking these questions, then what else are they, maybe whatever I was taught in my youth was all a big lie, and now they're protecting that lie and afraid of being exposed.
Oh, I agree with that. You can get real defensive on all fronts, because here you're dealing with this stuff internally. What do I believe? I'm not even sure of what I believe anymore, and all these doubts. And then you're getting the almost kind of the peer pressure and the you're getting it from the outside as well. Did it at any point cause you to leave the church and spend time out of the church?
It depends on what you define by going to church, right?
This is true, yes. That's a good point.
Yeah. So I think what I did sort of casually mention, not casually, but I did mention in my blog post was that it did for a while made me wonder if I was Christian anymore.
That's a difficult question to ask yourself.
It really was, but it was confusing to me because in my heart I knew that I never really turned away from God. Throughout all my bitterness and resentment and cynicism, I never really harbored any ill feelings towards God. It was always towards the institution of Christianity.
Right.
And so I was like, well, why am I feeling these feelings of that I'm not even Christian when I never really turned away from God. But still, I mean, that's how strong those feelings of shame was, that how strong we can be affected by our community. Yeah, it's a strong force to cause you to doubt yourself that much. And so, yeah, I did wrestle for a little while, but ultimately, I decided that I needed to trust my own intuition and my own heart more than what was imposed upon me.
Yeah, and you've probably heard a lot of the arguments. People will say, "Oh, you can't trust in your own heart, and the heart of man is deceitful and wicked above all things." Because I've heard all of that too. And as soon as you start to doubt, it's like people will put that on you, that you've given up on God, and it's almost like people want you to make a decision right away. Like, are you even a Christian anymore? And you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's too much to ask me.
Yeah, and I mean, the whole evolution of my faith is becoming comfortable with gray areas, right? It's like I wanted to just stay in my gray area. I was happy. I mean, it was hard, but I was still content to be in there, to continue to wrestle with issues without feeling like I have to decide if I'm in or I'm out.
And one of the points that you make is that you said that you became okay with not knowing. And see, that's also something I can relate to, and I'm comfortable with that statement as well. However, one statement that you often hear is, well, you need to be assured of your salvation. So how do you think that those two ideas contrast, or do they actually complement one another?
I think that assurance of salvation is another way of saying to not be afraid of hell. So I feel like it sounds good. It sounds like a good theological doctrine, but in reality, it's just it's a mask on fear.
That's good.
So I think I came to a point in my faith where I refused to live and be compelled by fear. I didn't think that was a good place to start a relationship with God. And so I didn't feel the need to be assured of my salvation. I was okay with just not knowing exactly what happened after we die. I don't think any of us know what's going to happen after we die. So I think that there can still be some certainties. Like I feel like I'm sure of God's love, and I'm sure of justice. I'm sure of truth, the things that I think is truthful in life. And there are still certain things that ground me in my faith, and the starting place is not fear.
Well, yeah, and isn't that so much better?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I do too. Coming from a place of fear, that it brings just so much more badness, for lack of a better term, but it brings so much bad into your life, and with the fear comes so many other negative emotions.
Yeah, I think sometimes it is easier. I can see the draw of fundamentalism, because it's more clean, right? It's sanitized, and you just know what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, what God is like, what God is not like. Like, it's always very formulaic and clear, and in some ways there's comfort in that. But I think that being able to be at peace with the gray area actually opens up our imagination more, to discover more of who God is and what is truth for us and how to live more fully into faithfulness. I just think it allows us to think bigger than when we're boxed in to, a list of doctrines. And
it allows you to live your own spirituality instead of somebody else's.
Yeah, and we're so unique, I mean, all of us, we have such diverse personalities and unique ways of living. What it means to be faithful for me is going to look very different than what's faithful for you.
Right.
Having the room to explore that and discover that, I think is much better.
I agree. And so it wasn't long for me into my faith journey when I started to question things. And I'm not even going to talk about like where in my childhood it was very fundamentalist, and then kind of fell away for a little while. In my early 20s, I had the quote unquote born again experience, but even shortly after that, it wasn't like years and years later that I started to question things and kind of stir up controversy and trouble with people. But I got the same sense from your writings that, you did the same thing. You felt that you were stirring up trouble and whatnot, but you felt that you were just being you. And that's kind of the way I always felt too. It's like, this is just who I am. I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to ask the hard questions. But that kind of newfound transparency becomes a problem for people, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I'm not somebody who enjoys conflict.
Well, I used to.
Yeah, and I mean, I think both my personality is not, I don't want to seek out conflict, and the way that I was raised, it was drilled into me as Chinese, as a Christian and as a woman, that I am to be compliant. And so I think both nature and nurture has kind of forced me to become this compliant girl who I used to be. And so it was a battle for me. Like, I was having to use a lot of courage to tell myself that I don't have to hide who I am.
Right.
Right. So it was a battle. Every time if I'm sitting in Bible study, I'm constantly battling within myself. Do I share what I really believe, or I can always be quiet? And I think a lot of people do, and I don't fault them for that, because it's really hard to speak up with your true opinion because the pushback you're going to get. So it was a process, and there are times that I just keep quiet, and I think it does take some discerning and some wisdom to know when to speak up, when to be authentic, and when to just, keep peace and stuff, like we talk about this in our Facebook group when we're with conservative family members at Thanksgiving, it's
right.
Like, well, maybe that's not the best time to bring stuff up, and just keep the peace. So it takes, a little bit of discernment, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So now this whole process you're going through, I don't know how long this was, how many years or so, but did it end up coming to a single solitary point where you're just like, something's got to change, and was there any drastic changes that were made, or was this just kind of a slow transformation?
What do you mean, the part where I started to unravel, or do you mean after unraveling?
Yeah, I mean like after. Like, did you end up coming to a point where you found, say, a new church, a different church, or did something change that kind of set you back on, or, set you on this new path?
No, I wouldn't say I can pinpoint a certain transition. I think I'm still on that journey. So the next blog post I have to write is going to be kind of hard, because I think I'm still coming out of it. I have to say I feel a lot more stable than I do maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Well, first of all, I don't think I question whether I'm a Christian anymore. So that's one thing.
That's good.
That has brought me peace. And I think a huge part of the saving of my faith, if it needed to be saved at all to begin with, is starting to write. And I think writing has forced me to, first of all, it's an act of creating. And so, like, I can't write a super cynical, fundamentalist bashing post. Nobody's going to read that. That's not a compelling piece of writing.
Sure.
You always have to, bring some sort of hope, in the conclusions of your writing. And so for me, it forced me. I mean, I didn't want to just write Pollyanna posts. I wanted to be real and authentic, but it did force me to process a lot of my cynicism and the negative parts of my faith unraveling. And that has brought me a lot of life to create new words, and then to let it go out into public and see that other people resonate with it and the way that it impacts people. That's bringing me a lot of hope as well. And so I think these days I'm just kind of surviving on little pockets of hope here and there. When I spot it, when I see beauty, when I see hope, when I see a new generation doing new things, When I see people doing justice, even even the people from my conservative past, they're changing, and whenever I see that, then it brings me life, and so I think that's where I'm at right now.
I think that's great when you see those the pockets of hope, and it kind of keeps you going as well. I'm seeing that now, and you mentioned where you're a little more stable in your faith. I'm feeling that same way. Whereas a year or so or 2 years ago, it was just so much confusion and not really knowing where I was going. And we've been pretty much out of the church for several years now.
Yeah.
And just we'll visit here or there, but I think a lot of times when I go and sit somewhere, either these old emotions, these old thoughts come back, or I start to see certain patterns that I'm not real comfortable with. But then when I do, just like you said, I see those little bits of like, oh, okay, this is good. I think I'm stabilizing, and I'm still a Christian, like you said, and just kind of on this journey. And then I'm going to figure it out eventually. It might take me a long time, but
right. I think it's important to respect people where they're at. Like, I think it was hard when I was very reactionary and cynical and negative, but I really want to honor people who are at that place still. I never want to rush people to a place of peace and a place of acceptance, because that's just, it would have made it a lot easier for me if other people let me be in that place of darkness and of confusion, because that's life, and it's human. And I do desire wholeness for people, and I don't wish for pain, but I also want to respect people in whatever place in the journey that they're at.
It's funny you mentioned that too, and about meeting people where they're at, because that's such a part of proselytizing and preaching to other people. You got to respect the process in people, and I loved your article in Huffington Post you wrote about evangelicalism, and you actually got a scholarship from Billy Graham was for your work in street evangelism. Is that correct?
I did. I really like to claim that as my evangelical cred.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, so when I was in college, like I said, I was really striving to be the good Christian girl, and I remember a distinct moment in my life in college when I told myself, if I am not sharing the gospel every day or every week, then I cannot call myself a Christian. I mean, that's how funny I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just so... I had a good heart, I had good intentions, but I was so achievement oriented. And so I committed to going out every weekend, after classes, and I just go street evangelizing to people. And that eventually caught the attention of people at the school, and I was awarded this scholarship for those efforts.
And so do you find though, and I've done a lot of street evangelism as well. I was incredibly drawn to it as myself, but you do tend to bring your own agendas to it. And see, now that I was already questioning at that time, so I don't think as much. I wasn't as goal oriented. I just liked going out telling people about Jesus. And for example, I used to go out with this one guy, and with him it was like he had to take the person from A to Z, the gospel, and get them to pray. Or else he wasn't happy. And sometimes I'd look at him and be like, hey, we can move on. And kind of give him this look like we can move on from this person. He ain't going to pray, and we planted the seed and let's just move on. And he'd argue with me after like, but we got to get these people. They don't know. They got to know Jesus. And I'm like, man, you got to tell them, but you got to also let people be. And
it's so funny because, that tells me that you guys had very different personalities. He needed results, and you were okay with just the process, even though you had the same goals.
Right.
That's so funny. It's funny because I can't decide if I look back on that period of my time with shame or with just endearment, like, oh, bless your heart.
Yeah, a little of both, I think. Looking back, I think there's a lot of those times that I was like, boy, I was probably in God's way more than I was really helping him.
Yeah, seriously. Oh my goodness, for sure. I mean, and this is the part I really feel shame about, but I remember one of the people that evangelize, because I mean, you do street evangelism, and who is going to let you grab them in the streets and talk to them about Jesus? A lot of time it's actually homeless people.
That's true.
So yeah, it's embarrassing to admit, but yeah, I remember this homeless woman that we talked to, and I mean, looking back, I had no concept of like systemic problems. I was just trying to share this four spiritual laws gospel, and I am extremely sorry that I did that to her. I didn't understand. I was wrong.
Yeah, because you'll think like, okay, well, if she gets saved, like everything's going to be better for her.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this magic thing's going to happen, and their life's going to change, and it's not the case.
In my article, I talked about how when you go to evangelize people, yeah, even though your intentions are good, and because the idea is that you love people so much that you want them to know Jesus, right? And that's a good intention, but in the end, it's still an agenda.
Right.
And the problem with that is you approach the person and you have to figure out what problem they have so that they can accept your solution of Jesus. And so, you know, from the get-go, you're looking at people trying to find out what's wrong with them. And that's just, no matter how good your intentions are, the person you're talking to is going to sense that, and they're going to sense your agenda. I know I do.
Yeah, it's critical.
Yeah, and it's just not very loving, and it's not going to. Well, first of all, I just think it's so burdensome. It's like, I mean, I remember this too from my past. It's like I didn't know how to make friends with people who weren't Christians, because I didn't know how to shed myself of that responsibility to share the gospel with them.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
so people were always potential converts, and I couldn't have a genuine friendship with them.
It's like being a salesman. You know,
Yeah.
You look at everybody as the next potential sale.
Exactly. Yeah, but I think, in my article, I talk about if you seek to be evangelized instead, you know, if you approach somebody and you want to learn, you genuinely desire to know what their values are, how they tick, you know, how they live their life, and what you can learn from them. I mean, it radically changes the dynamic of the relationship, because and it's amazing how much people, they're anxious to share their lives because so few people genuinely care. And so it just opens up a space for them to share vulnerably about their deepest desires and their heart. And then it just creates space for a genuine encounter, a friendship to happen. And I don't know. I feel like that's just the best way that we can love people in this day of so much social media noise. It's like there's no space to really listen to people.
Right. And that's something with like, you mentioned the social media, and with the Facebook page that you've set up is the Raising Children Unfundamentally.
Yes.
It's funny because there's so many of us that have come out of that, and now we're all kind of feeling somewhat burdened as well. Like I know when I started on this search, it was like, wow, I can't imagine anybody else feeling the way I do. And then,
Yeah.
Now like we got this one group that, that you started it and I'm in it and others, and we're able to meet so many people that can share the same experiences and in a safe place. And you find, okay, I'm not the only one that's like this.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah, I started this group. I didn't really put too much thought into it. It was, literally my friend just emailed me and said, you should start this group because, I wrote a blog series on raising children on fundamentalists, and I'm developing it into a book. And so it's just kind of what's in my mind and in my life right now. So yeah, my friend and the editor of my first book, Outside In, Ed Szewski, he just emailed me and said, you should start a Facebook group. And so I was like, okay. And honestly, I thought like 20 people was going to join, but it's...
How many is it up to now?
There's like more than 250.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so I've been really surprised, and then so dynamic. It's not just numbers. The people are
Involved.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
really. So it's been awesome. I love getting to know everyone, and there's so many smart people in there.
Haha.
Yeah, they're smart and interesting and loving and kind. It's been great.
And so all the information and whatnot that you're gathering from this Facebook page, this is part of helping you to write the book. I'd like to hear you talk a little bit, and we'll close up with that. But I'd like to hear you talk about the book and your ideas for it and what you hope to accomplish with it.
Yeah, so I think of this book as another step in my faith journey because I am still reacting to the conservative evangelicalism of my past. I mean, that's why, I got a lot of pushback from people saying, why do you have to say you're raising children on fundamentalists? Why can't you say you're raising children in the way of Jesus? And I don't know. To me, I think it's important to address where I've come from and to react against the harmful things that, the bad baggage and the bad religion that I want to shed. I think that, yeah, for me, it's a way to continue to wrestle with the spiritual baggage of my past, but it's also a way to move forward. And by creating something that I think this generation needs and how to find a fresh expression of Christianity that's not fundamentalist, that's life-giving, that seeks justice and liberation and wholeness. And so I'm excited about this My Heart project because I am so compelled by helping the next generation do better. And so, I created this Facebook group, not so much to find resources, but to just, have a place to talk about these things as I think through these issues myself. And a side benefit of creating it that I'm now realizing is this such a good reminder to me that these are real people and real families, and that my words impact, real people. Because sometimes, as a writer, I'm sitting alone in my study with the computer. It's easy to feel like I'm just typing into the void.
Right.
But to know that they are real needs, it helps me, it motivates me to keep doing the work.
Well, I think it's a great work. It's very important. I don't think that we see a lot of material out there about raising children unfundamentally, and so I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'm sure everybody in the group is as well.
Yeah.
And if we want to read, if people want to read your writing, Cindy, where do they find that? Where's your blog?
So I blog at cindywords.com. And you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm in all those places.
All right. Cindy, I appreciate it. You gave us a lot of information. Thank you for sharing so much.
Thanks so much. It was so fun.
Yeah, I look forward to the book and for being a part of the Facebook group as well.
All right. I'll see you on there.
All right. Thanks for connecting, Cindy. Thank you so much for the call.
Okay. Bye.